I recently came across this story online and it really creeped me out, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. It's about something strange that happened to a family in Tijuana, and honestly, the details are just so bizarre, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm curious to hear what you guys think actually happened, so let's get into it. Hatman kidnapped boy in my neighborhood. Okay, so let me start this by saying that the story may sound a bit crazy, but I swear many people around the neighborhood, especially the private street where this happened, can confirm that most of this was real. I apologize if my grammar is off, as English is not my first language. The event goes like this. It all happened a couple of years ago to a family that lives exactly on the same private street as my boyfriend's family, in the Florida area of Tijuana City, Mexico. My boyfriend told me this story once, and my sister-in-law confirmed it recently. It was a common day, I think it was a weekend, on the private street, with all the families going on with their normal lives. Some of the kids were playing outside as usual, but most of the people were inside their homes, as it was already getting late. So my boyfriend's family was in their house resting and watching TV when suddenly someone knocked on their door. My mother-in-law went to see who was knocking. It was a family that they knew already, and the mother was asking if her younger child was inside their house, as the family had been looking for him all around their house and the neighborhood, but apparently nobody had seen him. My mother-in-law was a good friend of the lady whose son was missing, so she knew for sure that the lady and her family couldn't be joking or messing with all the neighbors about something so serious. My mother-in-law said that they had not seen the boy anywhere, so the mother was visibly concerned, thinking that the boy had probably gone further down the private street on his own. All the people began to panic, since nobody had any idea where the boy was, so they gave up and called the police to ask for help. After a couple of minutes, the police arrived at the neighborhood, and they began asking questions to the family before entering the house. Suddenly, everybody around the private street heard a loud boom, as if something heavy had fallen to the ground. Apparently, the noise came from inside the house of the family whose youngest child was missing. The mom immediately ran inside the house to see what that loud noise was. All that she could see was her small boy on the table with his head resting as if he had been asleep there the whole time. The mother yelled to everybody that her child was over there, so it was big news for the whole neighborhood that the boy was safe and sound. But everybody in the family had been looking for the boy around the entire house and the whole neighborhood. How is it possible that nobody else saw the boy asleep on the table in the middle of the house? So after the event, people were relieved that the boy was apparently just playing hide and seek in his house, so everyone went back to their normal activities and continued with their lives. Or at least that's what everybody thought at the time. A couple of weeks later, my mother-in-law received a visit from the mother of the boy who had been missing, and they were talking about normal stuff that neighbors talk about when she suddenly remembered what had happened that strange day. My mother-in-law decided to ask the lady what exactly happened that day. This is where the really strange part begins. The lady whose boy had been missing that day said something like this to my mother-in-law while my sister-in-law was also listening from inside the house. It all happened in the living room, which is the first room you see when you enter the house. My boy was just eating cereal at the table when I told him he should not leave the table until he finished his cereal. Well, the last thing I saw was my boy barely sleeping at the table when I had to go upstairs for something that I needed. It didn't take long for me to come back downstairs, but my boy was no longer at the table. I only saw his plate of cereal. I began calling him and looking all around the house, but there was no sign of him. All of my family began looking for him as well, but again, there was no trace of him. We immediately went outside thinking he might have left the house without us noticing, but the thing is that we never heard him open the door, nor did the neighbors outside see him leave the house. I was afraid he might have left the neighborhood since it was getting dark, and I didn't want to think that someone could have taken him to hurt him or do something worse to him. Just when the police were outside our home, that's when I heard a loud boom. So I quickly ran to see what the noise was coming from inside our home. The only thing I saw was my child sleeping, with his head resting on the table next to his plate of cereal, just exactly as he had been before I went upstairs. When everybody left, I asked him where he had gone, and his answer scared the hell out of me. He said that he had been asleep on the table when he woke up and saw the shadow of a tall man wearing a hat right next to him in the corner of the living room. He said the man spoke to him and asked, "Do you want me to show you something?" And the man was holding a key that apparently belonged to a box under the table. According to my child, he then stood up, approached the tall man in the hat, and took the key from him. When he suddenly woke up, he just saw me waking him up from the table. We simply have no rational explanation for this. And as I mentioned, my boyfriend's family and the people from the private street can confirm this story. I really wish I could dare to visit the family or have a talk with the lady whose son went missing to hear the story directly from her or even her son. It's just that I don't know her very well, and I wouldn't want them to feel uncomfortable by having to remember such a situation. I don't know. Should I try to look further into that situation?